So, Patrick, I'm going to go right back to the beginning. You were a South London lad.
I was indeed. I was living in Streatham and going to school on Wandsworth Common, and yeah, so I'm a South Londoner, as they
Whoa,
say.
that's amazing. When I first came to London in, oh my God, it's probably like 1992 or 1993. The very first little place I lived in was in Streatham, Minehead Road at the top of the Common. Very nice little street it was too, I have to say.
Well, I was down off Kings Avenue on Rosebery Road, and yeah, a great place to live.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. So, what did mum and dad do?
Both of them were journalists. Well, they both met during the war. My father was a Fleet Air Arm pilot. My mother was a Wren, so they actually got together during the war. And myself and my two sisters were born just after the war from two people that obviously got together. Both then journalists. My dad then went on to Reuters and ended up as the editor of the South London Press. My mother into public relations. So, yeah, I come from a journalistic background family.
No, that is very, very cool. And I think I'm right in saying that your mum, Margaret, is remembered every year within the House of Lords.
Yeah, until recently, every year the House of Lords was a memorial lecture in her name. She was the first woman president of the Institute of Public Relations and the Press and PR branch of the National Union of Journalists. So they've honoured her in terms of having a guest key speaker each year, which has been wonderful.
And tell me, what was life like back in South London in the 50s, early 60s?
It was different. It was tough because my mum in the end was bringing us up on her own and tried to convince me that I should stay at school and perhaps do some university or something. But no, being the sort of strong-headed individual I was, I left school at 15 and became a messenger boy in an advertising agency.
Ah, well, you went to the school of life then because, you know, if you started at 15 in an advertising agency, it feels to me as if that's where you've been for the remainder of your career. Would that be a fair call?
Absolutely. Best way to be taught, to learn. One of my early roles was to be the southern stringer for the Littlewoods Pools Company.
Fantastic.
So I had that great privilege of going to tell people that they'd won the pools, that they are going to be earning lots of money. Please come with me to a hotel in London so we can look after the PR for you.
Well, in another sort of strange circular moment, I know the guy who both owns and runs the Littlewoods pools, or the pools, the football pools as they are today. It's still in operation, believe it or not. And, you know, as with most other businesses, of course, it's largely online now, as indeed with Match Poker. And we're going to come to that. So you ended up in an advertising agency. And of course, I guess, you know, the big moments in your career would have been founding with Peter West Nally in 1970, because you created some waves.
Well, Peter was introduced to me. In fact, they were trying to get my boss from the agency to join them to form this new PR company. My boss didn't want to leave, but was told to recommend somebody. I was a teenager, late teens at that stage, and he pointed to me and recommended that I join Peter West for this new PR agency. Being an obnoxious little man as I was in that time, I thought I ought to come up with something really creative and sort of talented. And I said to Peter, well, you know a lot about sport, Peter. Why don't we use sport as a means of communication? Because, of course, then sport wasn't being used as a means of communication. So being a clever dick, you know, I just came up with this idea that we should use sport as a means of communication.
Yeah.
And we did.
Yeah.
We did.
Didn't you just? So in very simplistic terms, you know, I would liken this to, you know, APAT going out and doing a deal with Party Poker. So we're the rights holder. We own the rights to sort of APAT and our members and so on and so forth, our properties. Party Poker pays us some form of fee and we work together. Essentially, you packaged sports rights to blue chips. Okay, so the sports rights, you know, we're second to none. We're talking FIFA, UEFA, the International Olympic, of course, athletics, cricket, snooker, tennis, swimming, cycling, rugby. There weren't too many sports that you guys didn't touch back then.
No, we were obviously the pioneers. We started it. We started originally taking briefs from clients and coming up with sports programs that would fit those briefs. We then found that the sports federations had no understanding. They didn't understand what were rights. They had no organizational structure. So quite quickly, we started being very successful here in the UK. We then expanded into Australia and Canada because of English language. I then had a major client called Coca Cola that wanted to actually change its perception as being an American drink being brought in by the American forces. And I was given a brief to see if I could come up with a global sport to where they could perhaps make themselves much more local. I created this sort of FIFA Coca Cola development program, which was extraordinarily successful, taking the sport into Africa and Asia. And then I found out when I asked FIFA, well, how do we give Coca-Cola a big impact at the World Cup coming up in Argentina in '78? And they said, oh, well, we don't know because we don't really control anything. It's all left with the Argentinians, who, by the way, had just gone through a military coup and were being run by some very, well, could I call them friendly generals?
Yeah, it's a really interesting scenario, and to be honest, it's a scenario that happens every day. And my next question was going to be, what were your challenges to deliver? Because of course, when we all get our PowerPoints out, everything looks so pretty. Whether you're a FIFA or a Coke, the vision is clear. The win-win proposition makes good sense to everyone, but delivering is often very challenging. What sort of challenges did you have in delivering the whole FIFA Coke deal in '78?
Well, this all started when FIFA was virtually a bankrupt organization. They just rented offices in Zurich. They probably had 4 or 5 staff. This is life before Mr. Blatter, because he came in later to run our program, and we recruited him specifically to run our program within FIFA. But FIFA didn't know about rights. They left it to their organizers to organize the World Cup. So I had to go again as quite a young man to Argentina just after that military coup to negotiate with the military junta to say, look, if we're going to keep the World Cup here in Argentina, you need to give me back all of the rights. I need control of the stadiums. I need to be able to pour drinks with Coca-Cola in the stadiums. I need all the merchandising, licensing. And strangely enough, we found a military junta that was obviously very consciously aware that the world was watching them. And to my absolute surprise, despite my young age, I actually got the generals to agree that they would pass everything to us, that they would take the military out and would put them all into Adidas 3-stripe tracksuits, and that they actually gave me back total control of the World Cup that FIFA had never realized they should have kept in the first place. And that really started the concept of bringing rights together to put them together for an exclusive group of companies. So in addition to Coke, I could bring in Canon, Philips, Capita Brazil, Canon. And that really was a complete change to how federations should approach their commercial partners, by being responsible, by being structured, by having agreements. And that then, as you said, led on to the Olympics, led on to tennis, led on to athletics. And, it still works today.
Yeah. I have to say the key message that I've taken out of that is that you can take the boy out of Streatham, but you're not necessarily going to take Streatham out of the boy, right? Because there you were up against the Argentinian generals, and you won that one. What was a key driver of change? I'm thinking TV. I mean, what helped you along the way?
TV, I think, came slightly later. Mm-hmm. TV then was very much the state broadcasters. So clearly back then I was working with the European Broadcasting Union. This is pre-Sky, pre-Berlusconi and Channel 5s, and what have you. So it was important because commercial companies like Coca-Cola, or people that had major brands like Canon, Seiko, Toyota, had very little commercial opportunity to promote and brand aware themselves. So by capturing World Cups, Olympics is slightly different because they didn't have stadia signage, but branding was extremely important on global networks, which were predominantly state broadcasters. So what I created gave these companies a chance for billions and billions of audiences around the world through state broadcasters. So the corporate sponsorship side was then probably more significant. What happened then was with Sky, Murdoch, and all the changes to satellite, cable TV, then the television rights boomed, but they boomed probably 5, 6, 10 years later and took over from sponsorship. but we were very much part of that sponsorship evolution and that
Yeah.
broadcast
That
evolution.
very much that early wave. And tell me, Patrick, was there ever a time, whether just post Argentina or indeed post the World Cup in Spain, that Coke's internal sort of accounting people looked at it and thought, this isn't paying for us, or did they get immediate payback?
No, well, the extraordinary thing I got Coca Cola to back me to go and negotiate with the Argentinians back in '78. I did a deal with them that, in essence, they would get 70% of the revenues that we would generate from the other participants. And in the end, it cost them nothing because we were that successful that we liquidated the whole of Coca Cola's cost in the World Cup in Argentina in
Fantastic.
'78. And thereby hangs the tale. In some ways, we were a little bit too successful because clearly I woke up giants and people that suddenly realized what I had in my hands. And as a young man, it was tough to sort of fight off the crowds that were beginning to realize just how valuable this could be.
Well, absolutely, because I suspect that the actual valuation of the brands themselves at that time, would have grown quite dramatically.
Yeah, but it was a challenge because, again, back then there wasn't a global budget. Even Coca-Cola, I think we had to have something like 6, 7 global workshops because all their budgets were with bottlers and with local countries. We had to change the whole perception of how companies bought global rights because they didn't buy global rights back then. So not only did we have to convince them that football, soccer was a global sport because technically it wasn't back then.
Yeah.
We also had to convince companies that they needed a central budget. So it was probably easier then to deal with the Japanese because the Japanese had more central control, central management. So if you go back to those days, the Fuji films, the JVCs, the Mitsubishis, the Toyotas and others, that had global brands, where the American companies were more spread. They had different products, different brands. So really, it was like the Wild West because it didn't exist. We had to teach people and show people. It was fun because it hadn't happened before. But yeah, look at it. Just look at what happened. Look at the Olympic package that we were starting in Moscow in '80. I think the whole budget that we were generating was around 25 to 30 million. I think the actual ticket price to be an Olympic sponsor at top now is probably around the 300 to 500 million just for a single package. So, my God, didn't we stumble across something that
different
times,
the
sporting world?
Different times. Yeah. Did any of the money? Well, any of the money. It's a difficult one to answer this, but did the money funnel down to what I would call grassroots? I mean, did any of the FIFA money sort of improve grassroots football? Do you think?
Yeah, it was all grassroots then, because again, back then, there hadn't been money. As I said, FIFA was renting offices, didn't have many staff. The funding went into the development program. So let's be quite candid, Africa, Asia weren't playing football, soccer back in those days. So just look at what that development program did to develop the sport into Africa, into Asia, into the third world of United States and Canada and Japan and Korea and Australia, which weren't football nations. So yeah, tremendous grassroots back then. And also we brought in federations and, we were teaching kids to play tennis, teaching kids soccer skills, teaching kids swimming. So back then, a tremendous amount of the money and energy went into grassroots development. Unfortunately, as the money grew and, money corrupts, then more and more people saw it as perhaps ways that they could all earn a bit. But no, back then it didn't exist because it hadn't existed. So there was nothing to sort of fight over.
You were very instrumental in the campaigning for Joe Havilange, the presidential the president of the IOC, effectively in 1974, or FIFA rather in 1974. So being sort of involved in a lot of that money flow. I mean, did you ever see or sense that corruption?
No, I wasn't involved with his election. I got involved after he'd been elected because Horst Dassler, the son of the founder of Adidas, found me, invited me over to meet with them and introduced me to the FIFA concept and wanted me to help live up to Avalanche's dreams of running a development program, creating a World Youth Tournament so more nations could compete. So I really came in to help bring commercial support to some of his ambitions. back then, as I said, though, there wasn't any money. So there wasn't any money to be dispersed.
Yeah.
I think Avalanche made a big mistake back then in that what he should have done, because he became effectively a professional president because he was working full time for FIFA, was he should have paid himself a salary. But of course, as time went on and monies were being raised, then clearly people were saying to him, well, take a commission. And back then, people thought, oh, okay, I'll have a commission, not looking at commissions as being corrupt or commissions being to what people would see of it today, because it was a very different world back then. Because it didn't exist. So the corruption followed later,
Yeah.
when clearly there was so much money, lack of understanding of people. And my own view of sport is, I'm not a great sort of admirer of lots of money going into elite sport. I think money should go into grassroots. It should go into helping young people, giving everybody a chance. Sport is a great leveler, but it's got to be participation, involvement, grassroots. So yeah, I've always been very much to see that the money should go into the sport at the right level and not into elitism or into other people's pockets.
Yeah, no, quite right. And do you think that that whole corruption message, which has sort of blighted everything for the last maybe 5 or 10 years, but particularly over the last 5 years, has that had a major impact on what you might call reputable brands in terms of becoming a barrier to enter major sponsorships today? Do you think, are they concerned about that?
It certainly had a significant impact because corporates have to be very aware of their social image. They have to be aware of social responsibility. And I think indeed with COVID-19, there is going to be even more of a change. I'm a great advocate that things need to change. Social responsibility now needs to become mainstream marketing and part of a marketing budget. So yeah, companies are concerned of aligning themselves with what might be questionable ethics to whether the transparency is there.
Yeah.
I have to give sport its due. It is reacting and changing because it has to. So it has to clean up its act, and people are doing a lot to clean up their acts. But I don't think things like the Olympics and the World Cup and the European Championships are still such significant events that get such fan support. They are so compelling. They're so, you look at Russia, everybody embraced, the Russian World Cup was a fantastic World Cup, and no doubt Qatar will be the same. So the event itself is bigger and more important than the individuals. So those big events can sustain themselves because they're so appealing to the mass and to the fan.
Yes.
The rest of the sports don't have that same ethos and that same ability. So therefore, yes, things are having to change. They have to respond in a much more ethical way, transparent way. And I think that sport, going back to the questions of participation and grassroots, social responsibility is going to be the new marketing for the future. We have to care about the globe. We have to care about our health. We have to recognize the issues that exist. So, I'm surprised my package approach still continues, but my feeling is we're on a wave of a complete change.
Oh, that's interesting. That is interesting. So what do you think does change look like?
Change looks like a responsibility that fans, customers, consumers, suppliers, everybody has to be consciously aware of everything in terms of how it impacts on the planet, how it impacts on the environment, how it impacts on social inclusion, how it impacts on health issues, being obesity, type 2 diabetes, that companies can't market themselves in the old big brain brashness that they did back in the 70s and 80s when I was doing all this. They now have to be very consciously aware that that brand and that brand image has to be totally responsible to the environment to which we all now live. So therefore, yes, sport has a very big role. I think less in the professional area, but more in the participation, grassroots, supportive area. And I think we're going to see a big shift in corporates really becoming global citizens and supporting sport in a global citizen sense.
So who do you think, in the sense that you were a driver of commercial development back in the 70s, 80s and 90s, who do you think will provide the leadership to ensure that that vision is delivered upon over the next 10, 15, 20 years? Where will that come from?
I think it's a combination of UNESCO,
Yeah.
which is obviously the education, cultural science, the operational element of United Nations, the international federations, be it IOC to a degree, and GAIF in terms of all the federations that sport need to embrace this as an approach. So sport will come together. UNESCO, therefore representing the United Nations, will come together. The corporates will come together, and therefore structured. Also, I see a great role with sports management and universities so that the academics become part of it, and they will see platforms to where it won't be just a rights sale, which is what happened to my package. It just came to people, selling the rights at the highest price they can, but it will really be meaningful back to, in fact, the FIFA Coca Cola development program, where there is real meaning to achieve a real meaningful objective. And people will be looking to actually see and have analyzed and the data, the evidence that these things are doing the good things that they should be doing. It can't be just on because we say it. It has to be clearly evidence that these things are having a very beneficial effect.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very healthy vision. Let's hope that comes to pass. Tell me, Patrick, you've obviously had a tremendous amount of experience as far as organizational rights holders are concerned. Did you ever get involved with individual rights holders? And I'm thinking, everybody seems to be talking about the Michael Jordan documentary on Netflix at the moment. There were a lot of players, who almost themselves were significant brands. Did you get ever involved with individuals?
I did in the early days and got out of it quite quickly. We were very much behind before Barry Hearn and
Yes.
snooker. I put the first World Snooker Championships together with a whole group of tables in Sheffield many years ago, probably back in the 70s. And there was a wonderful character called Alex Hurricane Higgins.
I know of him.
And I managed Alex for some years.
You're
had
kidding.
him dressed by a fashion designer called Tom Gilby. I had
Yes.
ergonomically designed clothes and waistcoats, and what a character. I had Joe Bugner. I looked after Tony Gregg, the cricketer. So yeah, in the early days, Peter and I thought that, like McCormack, that we should manage individuals and promote individuals. It was a nightmare. And,
Well, if Alex Higgins is your starting point.
I remember having to go to hotels to apologize, to get in cleaners, to get in painters and contractors, and it's a very specialist area. And in the early days with Mark McCormack, I knew Mark quite well, and obviously I totally respected. He had a brilliant organization, very much orientated, as was Donald Dell and Frank Krakel and things, in terms of representing, individual athletes, golfers, baseball players, tennis players, and it's a very specialist area.
No, absolutely.
It didn't fit with us. It didn't fit with us at all. And also then you get to a conflict if you start representing 2 or 3 football players and things, and you're also doing projects with FIFA and UEFA. Yeah, so the answer is yes, we did, but we very quickly realized this wasn't an area for us. It's specialist, and you really need to be a lawyer.
Yes, and now you know why Barry Hearn chose several very, very clean-cut players. He didn't have to go to hotels. I'm pretty positive about that. This is an interesting one. One of the biggest sporting properties in the UK is, of course, the Premier League. Did you ever try to get involved with that?
Well, again, in the early days, we represented probably all of the football clubs to what was then in the league back in when Ted Croker was running the FA. So
Ted,
all the signage, putting the clubs together. But we were then so much involved, with the FIFA, UEFA, creating the World Clubs Cup, concept in Japan, taking Notts Forest into Tokyo back all those years ago.
Yep.
It was difficult for us to then work aggressively at a local level. We did help Sky in the early days.
Uh-huh.
And of course, Sky made the big change, that Sky investment,
92.
into football, that whole sort of pro league development. Yeah, so I suppose on the fringes, but not directly into the domestic areas of that area, because we were too spread, as you said, on all those sports
Yeah.
at an international level.
Do you think, looking back with hindsight, is there anything you'd have done differently as far as the development of the Premier League is concerned?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. There's got to be, but I wouldn't give a quick, glib
Yeah,
answer
no, that's
because
fair enough.
it's you see, what always worries me is that the emphasis in terms of money, the money that's going to agents, the lack of social responsibility to young players. You know, we hear of 17-year-olds, 19-year-olds earning all this money and then getting themselves into troubles and into
Yeah.
difficulties. I don't think that the social structure, the responsible structure, it's gone too fast. The money's going in too much into areas that even, you know, we could debate about the PFA and other things. I think that there should have been more disciplines and more social responsible elements built into it. So when they start hitting the criticism, hitting the complaints, which are only just beginning, that, you know, this system would have been built to respond better, because, you know, they've got a big responsibility. You know, their importance and their influence on young people is so great, so vast. You know, the manipulation of young Africans and others is, you know, gets hidden and buried. But no, I think I would have built in a lot more social responsibility, social awareness, audit, yeah, and also in terms of questioning some of the ethics in terms of the owners.
Yeah, I mean, you've sort of hit on a couple of areas there that I think are particularly interesting. I don't want to spend too much longer on this, but it would seem to me that Premier League clubs supporting some of the lower league clubs is a win-win longer term. And I guess, you know, I was going to ask you about the impact that you think foreign ownership has had within the Premier League. I mean, are you pretty calm on that sort of thing, or do you think maybe it's not great?
It's not great. It's inevitable. I'm still a great believer that the fans should own the clubs. You know, the fan is the club. If you look at Liverpool, look at the Kop, and you look at the passion, you know, without all that, these clubs wouldn't exist. So, you know, I'm a great believer that, you know, fans should have much more say, much more influence, much more say, and perhaps even more control over to who can or can't own. But I would agree with you entirely. The sport generates so much money,
Yeah.
compared to where it was back in my day when I started these things, that really that money needs to be spread. As I said, the transparency and setting up the structures. You know, if the sport could actually, if you just look at what goes into agents, and if you put that into grassroots, just look at the scale.
Oh,
Just look,
huge.
you know, it's totally disproportionate. Is that there is no umbrella that actually has some say to how that incredible amount of money should be dispersed, and yet it's the same sport.
Yes.
So really, the sport itself is being irresponsible because it's not. You know, and this comes back to FIFA and politics, and, you know, who are the right people running the game, this, that, and the other. But when a sport actually can generate so much money, there shouldn't be problems at grassroots, should there?
No,
There shouldn't be
absolutely.
shouldn't be clubs going
Crazy.
bankrupt. There shouldn't be clubs that are worrying about COVID-19 because the sport can support itself. So yeah, you know, if I had a chance to say refine it, you know, yeah, take control till you're generating all this money, but make sure that money is going down to the bottom of the pyramid, you know, and supporting those kids that
Yeah.
don't make it. Don't just spit them out and destroy them, because, you know, that's not socially responsible, is it?
Well, I guess the socially responsible vision that you mentioned 2, 3, 4 minutes ago, you know, would sit very comfortably within football. Football needs that. Now, I've a couple of random questions for you. What sports do you think today are ripe for exploitation, if that's the right word? Maybe a word that you would have used back in the 80s, but are there any sports out there right now that you think are being represented in terms of sponsorships and stuff like that?
Well, the situation, because here we sit with what we're doing this weekend with match poker, technology has come to the fore. It's extraordinary the way eSport
Yeah.
is evolving and developing. Years ago, I signed a license deal for FIFA, for a FIFA game, which was just really just some licensing deal. It wasn't looked upon as being important, but when you see the growth of the FIFA game, the young and the participation within not just only console games, esport games, technology is changing the world, and sport has got to change and embrace technology. And that's probably in some ways why I've got involved with match poker and poker. But sports, if you take sport that I worked very closely with for many years with athletics, athletics' audience, like myself, is an age that we're all probably just about to fall off the cliff. if athletics doesn't sort of keep changing and keep embracing technology and new things, and all sports have just got to adapt themselves to the changing world, the changing circumstances we live in. I think the Olympics, unfortunately, is going to be facing a very, very serious view that if Tokyo is at a point where the pandemic means that it cannot be held next year, because although many of our countries probably by then would have got through the pandemic, there are going to be many hundreds other countries that aren't as fortunate as the Europeans and some of the stronger countries that have had the resources to fight it. What are you going to do? Are you going to host an Olympics where still there's substantial issues with athletes having to face COVID issues? So therefore, if those games get cancelled, the impact on sport financially is extraordinary. Now, will they dip into those billions of funds that the marketing and broadcast program has generated to support them? I hope so, because if they don't, I think you're going to see a lot of sports go to the wall, of the old traditional sports. But the new sports, the esports, the technology, the ones that can, react to the digital world, are the ones that will come to the future. And that's where the corporates will follow them. That's where the broadcasters will follow them. So, you've got a whole monumental shift in terms of, where the funds and resources and where the sort of reaction is going to go, which is why I'm delighted to be involved with match poker, because I'm in that category.
No, absolutely. So when we founded APAT in 2006, we put one of our goals as a vision piece, long-term vision. We'd like to see poker in the Olympics, which at that time seemed very fanciful and people weren't slow to tell us. But actually, your involvement, with the International Federation of Match Poker may lead to that inevitably at some point in future. So can you just share with our audience what the goals of the organization is?
Well, one, as you probably know, I didn't play poker, I played chess.
Yep.
So I wasn't a poker player. I resisted to wanting to get involved because, my view of poker was it was gaming and gambling. And it took me a while to be convinced of its sporting, academic, educational aspects. And Professor Charlie Nesson at Harvard, who runs the Global Poker Thinking Society, can take credit for convincing me that I was not foolish to take on the role and responsibility to create an international federation for poker. But as you said, if we want to be in the Olympics, we have to be a sport. We have to follow the lines and the things that are set out that give us the credibility to be a sport. And there's absolutely no question to what we are trying to do gives us the ability to become an Olympic sport in the next few years. Now, I doubt we'll get into Paris, but there is every opportunity that we could be in LA because, poker, let's be quite candid, is in the DNA of the Americans. But we can't, when I was first approached on this, there was a desire to try and convince everybody that every aspect of poker was a sport.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that because, as I got into it, obviously, there is randomness of cards.
Yeah.
Clearly, I couldn't have the randomness of cards if I'm presenting this as a sport. So I had to come up with something that actually met the criteria of sport and a team game, to where people are playing the same cards in the same sequence, taking away that randomness, orientating it towards the skill and the skill aspects was absolutely the only way to go if we wanted to have an international federation, if we wanted the recognition of being a sport, if we wanted to get WADA compliance and become what we've become as an international sporting federation. I had to orientate it to the sporting elements. Now, that's not to say we 100% believe, support, we're not against any other aspect of poker in the game. But if we want it to be a sport and to be in the Olympics, we had to accept that we had to take an aspect of the game to make that aspect of the game, if you like, the Olympic qualifier, because we have to go through all those stringent tests, those stringent reviews that everybody can accept that we're a sport. Now, you know, it's taken me a long time, but yeah, we got there.
You're there. You're there. Listen.
Yeah, we've got a bit more to do, but we are there.
For our audience, Patrick, I've got a short video. I think it runs a minute, and it just explains how match poker plays out. So let me play this for the guys, and then maybe we can go into that in a bit more detail. So here you go, guys. Running now. So there you go, guys. That is match poker. That is the vision for a very, very skill-based game that has players from the same team at different tables receiving exactly the same decks of cards, effectively. Same card setups, and how you play them basically decrease your level of skill. So what sort of progress have you made in terms of getting this game categorized as a game of skill?
We have it. We're recognised. We're recognised
Fantastic.
as an International Sport Federation. We have 65 nations now. Now, one comment I can make to all of your listeners is my biggest challenge has been to find poker passionate individuals that support us at a national level. When I've been able to, I found Stefan Kalhammer in Germany, who's put together an amazing national federation. I've got Isadora and Mario in Italy. I've got David Tai and Raymond in Taiwan. I've got passionate people within their nations that are big in poker in a broad sense as well, but have all said, look, this isn't something that's threatening to other aspects of poker. You know, what Patrick is doing really supports the image. It helps us to go into the Olympics. It gives us another adjunct. So they help me in creating fantastic national federations. And that then helps me get into leagues, get into structures. So I need more poker people, to support and volunteer. Let's, here I am in the UK and I've never got round to getting a proper English federation, a Welsh federation, a Scottish federation. No, Ireland, fantastic, because you could have Andy on and Finton, the Irish
absolutely.
are wonderful, absolutely wonderful, supportive, been champions. If everybody was an island, I'd be ecstatic. So, I need support from the poker community, in the Caribbean, in the Baltics, in, everywhere. We need passionate people that will help us at a national level, because if we're a sport, we need national federations. The only way I can do that is to get passionate people to collaborate, to volunteer, to support me. But we are getting there. because we've now got software that works, and that's taken a long
Yeah.
time, but we can now run leagues, we can run tournaments. As a sport federation, I have to run continental events each year. I have to run a Nations Cup each year. So the reason we've gone online this weekend is I can't defer us to next year like an Olympics, because we're going to have the event live hopefully next year. So the fact we couldn't play in Peru means that I have to still run that event, and thank goodness to video conferencing and, you know, bringing people together from their own homes. This weekend we have 100 athletes representing 12 nations that will be playing from the comfort of their homes, and we will play the Nations Cup. Justin Huxley, the Hux, will be our tournament director in terms of popping in and keeping an eye on everybody. We've put all the security issues together. The great thing about our game, everything is recorded. Every behavior of every individual could be watched, because not only can we see them, we can see how they're playing their hands. So we can maintain the integrity. We can maintain the fact that it's based on skill. So these are all the elements that were critical to me to present, to give to the IOC, to why we are a sport. We have that recognition. And so we can now just follow the standard procedure, and we could be an Olympic sport now. There is absolutely nothing except that it will be match poker form that will be recognized as a sport. But that doesn't matter, because that benefits poker through everything.
Absolutely.
So we're not a threat. And that's the problem I've always had, is that people think that I'm trying to stop other forms of poker by making match poker something, you know, on its own. That's not true. Absolutely not true.
Yeah.
Match poker is the sport recognition. It doesn't negate any other aspect of poker.
Yeah, I think poker players are strange at times. They're very agile, but they're sort of slow to change. So awareness needs to be very high before they will change. And if they do change, in my experience, you know, it doesn't take too long to actually convince them that actually this different form of the game is pretty good. I mean, that's what I sense, and you know, certainly we will support you. We will you know, communicate details of this weekend's event and the, you know, where the stream is coming from to our members. We'd be very, very happy to do that for you. And I guess this weekend's going to be a very high profile test for you, because you know, it's out there in the public now. So of the tech, it's going to be a real test. Are you confident that you'll meet the challenge?
We're all in together. we have to be. We've got some tremendous loyal support at the national levels. We've got some great players. Andy is coming on in terms of, you know, he's experienced. He's helped us. We had a great event in Dublin. Yeah, I think, as I said, the biggest problem has been communicating to people what the real intent is of IFMP. That, you know, we're not a threat. We're part of the family. We need more family support. We have got, you know, a tremendous group of players around the world that will give us all the support that we need. As long as the technology works, I think we're going to have one hell of a weekend.
No, I'm really looking forward to it, and I will certainly be viewing myself. Tell me, Patrick, do you have a strategy in place to appeal to next-gen players? You know, who is this sort of new poker player coming through, this match poker player? Is he today maybe a young gamer, a 13 or a 14-year-old gamer? Or is he, you know, somebody whose dad maybe plays poker? I mean, who's going to be your target customer?
It's interesting to see, if you look at the Korean team, they are young gamers that are coming through, and with massive followings. So, you know, the gamers are coming and wanting to and enjoying, and they understand it. But the interesting thing is we've got involved with looking at city leagues and human resources, where people want to do bonding and bring people together. People are beginning to really enjoy to play match poker. You know, we've had good-looking teenagers being extremely successful, and 89-year-old amazing Irish players, in that, you know, we are totally inclusive. We're totally open to everybody to participate, enjoy. And everybody has that competitive spirit. And I think in the past, a lot of people have been slightly nervous of getting into poker, because perhaps they think, oh, it's just the money, or, you know, is this a risk? I think we're opening up a vision to where young people have got no fear or involvement. And yeah, I think we're beginning to see a lot of people want to come in and join in, want to be all in together and enjoy just the fun of it. But then it's competitive, and we all like a bit of competition.
No, don't we just? So, Patrick, I guess in closing, I think you've suggested that the organisation can support the vision today, but you need help. You're looking for passion. So, any of the guys who might be watching this video, guys and gals who might be watching this video tonight, or who might watch it in a week or a year's time, how can they get in touch if they want to?
Just communicate through us, through our website. Baron, who's our executive director, would love to hear from everybody and anybody, that is passionate to be a volunteer to help. All the sports that we've been talking about tonight survive on emotion and passion from the volunteers. We're here to make poker the biggest sport in the world. We need your help. We need the passion. We need the involvement. We need people to help us build national federations, around the world. So, we're all in this together, as I said. So if I can get a few more to be in with us, that's exactly what we'd love to hear.
Well, fantastic. Patrick, 50 years on from founding your business, West Nally, which has made such a difference, as far as traditional sports marketing is concerned, what we now consider traditional sports marketing. It's incredible to see the passion that you still have for, developing visions and actually executing on that development. Lee, are there any questions coming out of the chat box that we haven't covered in our interview?
I think we've pretty much covered most of it off, actually.
Excellent.
A few people mentioning things like the kind of mental Olympics and that kind of thing, and comparing it to chess, which obviously you mentioned about, Patrick, was kind of where your background came from.
Yeah, we've had the chance to work with the International Mind Sports in terms of chess, bridge, go, drafts, which we're happy to do. But I think eSports tends to be more to where we see ourselves and the alliance in terms of the technology, to the passion, to the fan fests, to data. We have you guys just love that data. When we provide all those hand logs and information, I can't believe how much they get consumed. And therefore, I think we're much, much more into eSports than we are into some of the mind sports. But
no, poker players love a good stat.
Absolutely.
That is for sure.
They do. They do indeed.
I see a couple of comments coming through. Steve Munnings just says, Mike Postle, you'll need to keep a very close eye on the Mike Postles of this world because they'll be sat with mobiles on the table. Steve Forty says, people playing COD, Fortnite, FIFA are the next generation of poker players. I'd have to agree. I think that's a fairly solid vision. Simon Lawler says, any feature table, Patrick, so for the weekend, do we go to matchpoker.fed or matchpoker?
Sport.
Okay, so we'll
get sport. We have the sport identification because we are a sport.
Matchpoker.sport. Fantastic.
You'll find us. You'll see the leaderboards. You'll see, as I said, a delayed stream. But yeah, it's going to be fun. No,
I'm really excited for it. I didn't see the brief from Joe, but if you still need some volunteers or helpers, invigilators for the weekend, I mean,
I think we're okay. We're okay
Great.
for the weekend, but what we do need is we need some support to get some more national federations being active. And this is absurd. Where here I am sitting in Oxfordshire, UK. I tell you, Scotland, Wales, and England need some active people to support us in getting our federations moving.
Well, we've had the discussion before. I'm pretty sure we could help you with that.
Fantastic. That's what I need.
There we go. Okay, listen, thank you, Patrick, from myself and Lee, and all of the listeners, I'm sure, have really, really enjoyed the discussion this evening. I wish you the very, very best of luck over the weekend. And a last call to all of you guys, wherever you are and whenever you hear this, if you would like to get involved, just go straight to the website. We'll put it in the comments box and offer your support. Thank you, Patrick.
My pleasure. Take care.
Win or lose, sink or swim, one thing is certain, we'll never give in. Side by side, hand in hand, we're all in together.